Right now, across Mexico, a massive wave of protests is shaking the country's political foundations. And what's really interesting is that it's a youth-driven movement, lit by a single tragic spark. So in this explainer, we're going to break it all down, how this fire started and where it might be headed next.
So, what does it take to get an entire generation onto the streets? It's almost never just one thing, right? It's usually years and years of simmering frustration. That's the fuel, just waiting for a single moment to set it all off. To really get what's happening in Mexico, you have to look at both. All right, first, let's talk about the fuel, the tinderbox. For years, public frustration in Mexico has been building and building over some really deep-seated issues, creating this incredibly volatile environment. I mean, we're talking about decades of problems that have just been simmering under the surface. You've got rampant violence from powerful drug cartels, you've got widespread corruption, and a security system that a lot of people feel has totally failed them. And all of that leads to this deep, corrosive distrust, this feeling that the government either can't or won't protect its own citizens. Now, into this pressure cooker steps a brand new political force, Generation Z. See, they've grown up seeing all of this, but they're looking at it with fresh eyes, and they are absolutely unwilling to just accept it as the way things are.
So, who exactly are we talking about? Well, it's those folks born roughly between 1997 and 2012. As they start coming of age and stepping into the political world, they're bringing a completely different rulebook with them. You know, where older politics might have been all about party loyalty and just accepting the old ways, Gen Z is different. They're digitally native, so they organize online in a heartbeat. They're fiercely independent. They don't really care about the traditional party lines. And here's the most important part. They are demanding a better, safer future than the one they inherited.
So you've got all this simmering frustration, and you have a new generation ready for change. It was a powder keg. All it needed was a spark. And on November 1st, 2025, that spark came in the most brutal, public way you can imagine.
And you can really see it laid out perfectly here. Decades of the slow burn, all this anger and fear, brought to a sudden, violent breaking point by one single event. The victim was Carlos Alberto Manzo. He was the mayor of Uruapan, and he was genuinely popular, really beloved by the community. And he was assassinated in broad daylight during a public event. For so many people, this was just the ultimate symbol of the state's failure. I mean, if a public official can't be protected, what hope is there for anyone else? And that's when this chant just took over the streets. Carlos did not die, the government killed him. This echoed everywhere, and it directly blamed the government's total inability to control cartel violence for his death. So the key here is this wasn't just seen as a murder. It was seen as the inevitable result of a failed system. Okay, so the spark hits the tinderbox. What follows is a massive mobilization. But here's the thing. This wasn't just a chaotic outburst of anger. It was an organized movement with a really unique identity and a very, very clear set of demands. The movement, which calls itself Generation Z Mexico, has some really distinct features. It is fiercely nonpartisan. This isn't a left versus right thing at all. The protesters wear white clothes and straw hats to honor the mayor, and their whole identity is this incredible mix of pop culture and raw political anger, all of it organized and amplified through social media. And their goals? They're incredibly specific. They've put together a petition for change with several core demands. At the top of the list, guarantee public security, end the deep-rooted corruption and cartel influence, demand real transparency from politicians, and, crucially, get more young people represented in government. And man, did this thing spread like wildfire. What started as one protest in the city of Morelia on November 2nd, well, it just exploded into a nationwide phenomenon. Within days, you had demonstrations in Mexico City and dozens of other major cities spanning multiple states. Now, an uprising of this scale is, of course, going to trigger a major reaction from the government. That reaction led to clashes, and it's raising some pretty serious questions about where this movement goes from here. So while the protests started out peacefully, things really took a turn in Mexico City. According to reports, masked groups tried to breach the barricades at the National Palace, and that led to a really swift and heavy-handed response from the police. And the human cost of that was significant. Reports were coming in of over 100 police officers injured, along with at least 20 protesters. On top of that, there were widespread arrests across the country, which sparks concerns that maybe some more radical groups were trying to hijack the movement's message. So right away, you get two completely competing narratives. On one hand,
the government came out condemning what it called destructive elements and tried to blame the whole thing on its right-wing political opponents. But the protesters, they're sticking to their story, that this is a nonpartisan, generational revolt against a broken system. They're demanding accountability and protection, not a political takeover.
And it's so important to remember that what's happening in Mexico, well, it isn't happening in a bubble. It actually mirrors this powerful global trend of youth-led movements, from Nepal to Peru, where young people are rising up and demanding transparency, justice, and an end to corruption.
Which leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? Are we just watching another protest, one that will eventually fade out? Or are we witnessing the actual birth of a new, organized, and powerful political force in Mexico, driven by a generation that has finally and completely had enough?